Our next speaker is Prof. Sianda Nicola, and she is an associate professor and linguist and co-chair of UWC's Media Inclusion and Diversity Chair. And she has also done some award-winning research that spans media ethics, rhetoric, and multilingualism, and is deeply engaged in community-centered initiatives, and she promotes inclusive journalism, preserves archival heritage, and influences national and international discourse. So I hand over to you to talk about your position on this.
Thank you very much, Prof. Daniels. All protocol observed. Good morning, colleagues. I'm Sianda Nicola, based in the linguistics department, not a linguist. I'm more of a rhetoric and journalist scholar. And I've titled my intervention this morning, An Engaged University, Grappling with the Place, Space, and Circumstances of Language in the Intellectual Project. I think what defines a university as a space and a place is not a question I have directly tackled in my scholarship, but I think by virtue of being someone who is interested in media and communication and education, it is a question that I come back to, and I think we all come back to over and over again as we ask ourselves that if universities are defined by the knowledge they produce and disseminate, what does it mean to create a truly inclusive academic community? So today I am going to ground my input in an argument advanced by Omodan in a paper titled A Decolonial Critique of the University's Role in Shaping Social Consciousness. Positioned at the intersection of reason and practical life, the paper dissects the university system's dual role in upholding and in contesting the hegemonic discourses of modernity. So in my case, this is particularly when it comes to the place of indigenous languages, the spaces they occupy within this ivory tower, and the circumstances in which they are allowed or not allowed to thrive. In the argument advanced by Omodan, the university is both a gatekeeper, where it decides on what knowledge is valid and what isn't, and a guardian of a certain kind of linguistic orthodoxy. The role of language here is not only as a medium of instruction, but rather a powerful tool of inclusion and exclusion, often silencing diverse ways, not just of speaking, but of being and of knowing, because that is all vested in how we use language. At the same time, the university can and has played the role of a liberator, as the case of UWC shows, where it's a space where these hegemonic discourses can be challenged, they can be rewritten, and they can provided we are intentional about creating those circumstances. In May last year, we were very privileged to have Professor Kwesi Pra deliver the Arts and Humanities Dean's Distinguished Lecture. And he urged us to recenter language in decolonial efforts, stating that you cannot decolonize in English. Of course, this is not new. It's something we keep coming back to, and people like Professor Kwesi have devoted their lives to doing the work. But I think it grows in urgency with every passing year as we grapple with the legacy of colonialism in our institutions. In our context, with this globalized higher education sector, where English is presented really as the only language of academic credibility, how do we reimagine the place of our languages, the space they occupy, and the circumstances through which they are legitimated as mediums of intellectual thought, especially when it comes to that intersection between reason and practical life? As we push for intellectual and social transformation, we must ask ourselves if we are truly creating a space where the linguistic diversity of our nation is celebrated and built upon, not just tolerated. And we must ask ourselves as UWC how we can live up to our legacy as the university of the left and the marginalized, and the site of intellectual and social transformation, given our unique history that has been cited by the colleagues here. I just want to refer to a personal experience that has really marked my work. In 2020, I did a study on the role of language in epistemic access in journalism studies, and I had students as participants. And one student's insights have really stuck with me, and I always imagine them when I meet students for the first time in lectures. She was one of those students who never ever raised her hand in class, but when they'd break up for group work, she'd be talking to her colleagues, or after class, she'd come up to me and really talk about the substance of the lecture. And in the focus groups, she said that, and I'm quoting her, "I came from the Eastern Cape and I was in a Xhosa school and all I spoke was Xhosa. So when I got here in 2016, I couldn't speak proper English, so I felt uncomfortable to even express myself with other people, because I was like, they're going to judge me because I don't speak properly, and they did. I failed my second year, but I feel that was my biggest struggle." Now, I'm really happy to say that the student has really gone on to thrive. She's really one of the emerging media and comms people in our country. But I think this has been in no small part because that period was the period of the Fees Must Fall movement. And there were demands from student activists on us as academics and institutions to center language. So thinking about someone failing a subject, not because they don't know the content, but because they don't speak the language, really bites. Responses to these calls have not been as extensive as they need to be, and often they rely on the willingness of individual lecturers and personal accommodations that people provide through things like translanguaging informally in the classroom setting. But the broader institutional shift really does remain slow. I think her success for me shows what is possible if we begin to dismantle these barriers, even if the progress is incremental. It reflects the systemic barriers and emotional toll placed on students and academics who are forced to navigate a higher education system that delegitimizes their mother tongues. The struggle for proper English is not about the grammar. Really, it's about the right one has to express their identity, their intellectual engagement, who they are, without shame in this context. It's really about creating a space for linguistic diversity, ensuring that there is a place for indigenous knowledge systems, and transforming the circumstances that dictate who belongs and whose voices matter in the academic space. Bringing it to us as academics, think about how academic success is really tied to the journals we publish in. Most of those are in English, and how this then shapes our research agendas. If you've tried to write a paper on Ubuntu or African spirituality, and you have to explain a concept in these journals, you waste like a page or two that you could devote to actual engagement with the theory you're advancing. And this, I think, is something we have to do, because that is what counts, these DHET accredited English journals. Or another example is when we promote international partnerships and student exchange programs, which are vital for our global positioning, but often inadvertently reinforce the dominance of English and other Western languages, sidelining local linguistic and cultural contexts. So how do we sit with this tension of being a globally engaged university while simultaneously being rooted in our local context? Do we continue to prioritize global metrics and partnerships, creating a space where our own languages are relegated to the periphery? Or do we boldly forge a new path, creating a place where our linguistic diversity is one of our greatest strengths on the global stage? I think the opportunity to grapple with a new institutional operational plan presents us with a chance to be bold. The University of the Western Cape has indeed, though, grappled in some parts with the space, place, and circumstances of language in how it upholds its mandate as a transformative institution. It is good to know that we do have scholars whose work has moved the needle in no small way in the fields that they are in. Shout out to the Center of, to Prof. Kashula's chair, which focuses on forensic linguistics and multilingualism. We also have the center in my faculty, whose name now escapes me because of nerves, the Center of Multilingual Research and Diversity is Professor Quintin Center. But we do need to keep establishing these units, not just in arts and humanities, but within the natural sciences that my colleague spoke about. So in closing, I would like to leave us with a few questions to guide some ponderings. I am a former journalist, so I don't like being asked questions. I like to ask them. So I'll pose two questions that we can think about. Number one, how do we move beyond simply acknowledging the importance of indigenous languages and actively create institutional spaces and circumstances where they are not just used but foundational to teaching, research, and community engagement? And number two, are we willing to accept the uncomfortable truth that our own institutions and the languages that we privilege may still be holding us back from the very transformations we claim to want to champion? And if so, what do we do about it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sianda. I think you highlighted a very important aspect of universities being gatekeepers, ensuring inclusion and exclusion through language. And I think it's something we've been grappling with, and if we're looking at the new IOP, it's something we really need to pay attention to.